Hello everyone, friends. In this video, I would like to discuss with you the main mistakes people make when investing in Dubai real estate. I'd probably like to start this video with the basics, the most fundamental things. When you're planning your very first real estate investment, or even if it's not your first, I would always recommend that you don't rush to make any hasty decisions about choosing a particular property. In other words, the most important thing in investing is always choosing the right property. So what does it mean to make the right choice? First and foremost, it's definitely the location of the property, the developer of the project, and of course the forecast. That is, it's not just about buying at the price the developer offers, but about thoroughly analyzing the forecast for the property you're investing in. That is, to understand how much this property could be worth in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years based on similar properties. So what do I mean by that? For example, if you are buying a property from a developer, if you are investing in a developer in a location where houses have already been built, I always recommend analyzing the prices in neighboring buildings, analyzing the prices in completed houses. Yes, of course, the building you might be investing in could be of a different level or class. You need to understand what the real potential value of this property could be at the end. Because very often unscrupulous brokers simply claim that this property will increase by a certain percentage, but that percentage is absolutely unfounded. And overall, this is the main mistake. Expectations do not match reality. That's why you need to look at the real picture, meaning comparable properties in this location or similar properties from this developer in general, and understand their growth potential. This is probably the first mistake. Choosing the location, choosing the developer. The second, and probably a very important mistake when it comes to investments in general, is understanding the budget that you can invest. What do I mean by this? In Dubai, almost all developers offer installment plans. Well, actually, not almost all. Every developer sells properties with installment plans. Very often, there are cases when a client is told, for example, that they can exit the property at 50 or 60% of the payment made. But for one reason or another, for example, the investor's expectations don't match the reality of the market. What do I mean by that? For example, let's say we bought a property for $1 million, paid 20% up front, that's $200,000, and then paid 60% at handover, which is $600,000. But for instance, we're not ready to pay the remaining amount, say another 40% at handover. The client simply wasn't financially ready. For example, at the same time as us, so we bought for $1 million and started selling the property, say for $1,300,000. Then we realize that we're facing tough competition. In other words, this is healthy market competition. For instance, someone is fine earning a bit less, so they're okay with a price of $1,250,000. Another might want just $1,200,000. But we understand that the real value of our property is $1,300,000. But we need to wait. That is, we need to wait until, for example, all the cheaper offers leave the market and the property reaches exactly the price we want for it. But if you're not ready to pay these $400,000 at the end, the developer will simply demand that you do so, or might even threaten to terminate the contract, impose penalties, and so on, forcing you to accept the property, take the keys, and specifically pay this final payment. And you simply won't have any choice but to sell this property for less than its actual value. And then you might end up selling it for, say, $1,200,000 or $1,150,000. Although in reality, for example, if you waited 2, 3, or 4 months, you could easily sell it for the originally expected and projected $1,300,000. That's why I always tell my clients, if we've put together, say, a financial portfolio of $10 million, for example, with a projected exit at, let's say, 60% completion. Yes, that's great. Yes, often that's achievable. But always be prepared that you may need to make the next payment according to the payment plan or even pay for the entire property in full. Because if you take on a financial burden, specifically in terms of an installment plan that is higher than you can actually afford, you may often lose out in terms of profit and investment attractiveness to those investors who are willing to wait until these properties, which are being dumped, are actually realized. That is, when they are sold below their actual market value. And as a result, you will lose out on the income you could have earned. This is probably the second biggest mistake. The third mistake, which is also quite common, is when an investor thinks that if, for example, they go directly to the developer and buy from them, they will get a better price, better offers, and so on. This is also a common mistake among beginners. Dubai is a location, well, in general for investments, a place that is mostly sold by brokers, by specialists who work here. Because the developers themselves can't cover the whole world with their advertising and so on. And no developer is interested in ruining relationships with agencies or trying to be above the agencies. Because agencies, well, brokers, that's basically their bread and butter. They are the ones who bring clients to them, who sell the real estate, and who later on continue to serve the client. And when you go directly to the developer, on the contrary, you will most likely get offers that are less attractive because the developer doesn't care at all what you, as an investor, are buying. They will probably offer you a worse floor. They will offer you exactly the same financial terms. In Dubai, we have an absolute rule that there can be no additional discounts from the developer or from the broker. The price must always be the same. So with any developer, whether it's the largest state-owned one or a private developer, if you buy a property, the price will always be exactly the same. But what do you lose by buying real estate directly from the developer? You lose the opportunity to receive a fully objective consultation and a direct comparative analysis that a broker can provide you. So what does the developer do? They always say that their property is the best, the most wonderful. You simply won't find anything better according to them. And often, under this influence and impression, you might form the opinion that yes, you really are making the right choice. When choosing any property for investment, you always need to understand what you can compare it to and what its projected price growth figures are. And overall, you need to have a clear understanding of your expectations. Also, with developers, especially in Dubai, after-sales service is extremely important. It's not enough to simply buy a property and pay for it. What's really important is the subsequent transfer of funds. That is, how you will pay for this property, how you will maintain it, how you will receive various statements and reports on it, such as construction progress updates and so on. The developer will not provide you with any of this. The main advantage of working with a broker is that the broker provides you with full after-sales service, starting from making payments, to accepting the property, to its sale if it's an investment property, to managing it if it's for rent, and so on. And it is very important to choose the right competent specialist with whom you will make your investments, someone who will be with you at every stage and will truly be your support and your shoulder to lean on. Well, your shoulder to lean on, so don't make this mistake. Never go directly to the developer thinking that you'll get better terms or better properties there. No, in Dubai, it definitely doesn't work that way. I'd also like to finish with another common mistake. That is, investors think, or rather not so much think as expect, that the market will crash, that there will be some kind of collapse, and that prices will go down. In reality, I've been hearing this from investors for the past 6 years, that soon prices should go down, the market should correct itself, and prices will become more attractive. I guess I'll wait. This is a completely unfounded mistake. Even if you look at all the sources that analyze Dubai from every angle, its investment appeal, quality of life, and so on, all sources indicate that Dubai is in the lowest risk zone and that we still have many years ahead for the market to grow. So when you think maybe I should wait or maybe things will be better in 6 months, or often we have investors who come to us, receive a complete analysis and clearly defined financial goals. They say, I'll be ready for this in about 6 months. I would say this, looking at the Dubai market right now, all absolutely liquid projects are sold within 1 or at most 2 days. If right now you see that this property is attractive from every angle, you understand that it has a great location, a good price, you've analyzed it with your broker, and you realize that this property fully satisfies you and matches your requirements, don't try to wait, don't put off making a decision, make it now, because in just 3 to 5 days, this property simply won't be available anymore. And a lot of investors end up kicking themselves later saying, why didn't I buy this property 6 months or a year ago? When they see the numbers and realize how much the property has appreciated. It doesn't have to be just 6 months. They might say a year, 2, or even 3 years. And very often I encounter investors who say, I should have listened to you back then and bought that property. So don't make the same mistakes. I think I've covered all the main mistakes. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting and useful. See you next time.